Thank you, Comrade Nomantu, to the leadership of the ANC, the Alliance, and all of the affiliated structures. Greetings, and thanks for affording me this opportunity. I come here to speak on behalf of the Gordhan family, as well as friends of PG. I was at the funeral house, or the family house, this morning, as we were doing our final farewells. And it is then when I was asked to come and speak here. So unlike others, I don't have a laptop or an iPad. Please excuse me. Our deputy chairperson of the foundation, Mandla Nkomfe, and myself visited Comrade PG about 5 or 6 weeks ago, just after the elections, to understand what he was going to do now that he had opted out of formal politics. What we didn't realize was that we had visited on the day when it was the Wimbledon semi-finals or the French Open semi-finals, and those were women's semi-finals. And we could not compete with his attention on the TV. He was so fixed with that TV, with that semi-final match, that we left without conveying what we wanted to. And what we wanted to go and talk to him about was to impart his knowledge about organizing. We have come to understand that in our country today, the organizing ability of people in communities is not structured, it's not properly done, it's ad hoc. With the result is that when people have problems, in most cases, it results in violence. As not organizing to use the institutions of democracy to bring pressure onto those who occupy office and who need that pressure. We wanted to draw on PG's experience from building the civic movements in Durban, across KZN, and the civic movements across South Africa. Comrade Ambi, it's a discussion that we wanted to come back to you with, because the work of the Soweto Civic Association and other associations is where the key gaps are in our democracy today. And we see it every day in our crumbling cities across the length and breadth of this country. But we didn't have that discussion. Four weeks ago, we held a farewell for PG, and we didn't know that a few days after that, he would receive the news that he had cancer. He didn't know. He had very little time to prepare, but he was going to fight it. Unfortunately, by Tuesday last week, he was hospitalized. On Monday last week, he was hospitalized. And from Tuesday onwards, Tuesday, Wednesday, a little bit of Thursday, he started calling people or allowing people to visit him. I phoned Comrade Solly from the SACP to say, this is serious, come and see him. And I'm glad that he did. I phoned Bishop Umpulwana to say, this is happening, please come over. And I'm glad that the SACC was there. But from his deathbed, he directed his funeral. We were preparing for his funeral to take place in Johannesburg. By Wednesday night, he said to Nava Pillay, that funeral must happen in KZN, must happen in Durban, because that is where I'm from. And my body must fly with SAA and no other airways. Those were very specific instructions. Today at 5 o'clock, His body left from OR Tambo, and I think is now landing in Durban at about 6 o'clock, which is why his family could not be here. I'm also happy that the last visitor to Comrade PG was President Ramaphosa. He was there on Thursday night late. We had all left, but he came and he spent up to 30 or 45 minutes there talking to PG. Not sure that he understood, but recommitting himself to the ideals and the aspirations and the issues that PG was still trying to champion up until his last few days. Comrade Pravin was an ANC loyalist, but not one that could not see the faults in his own organization. Not one that was blinded to the faults in his own organization. And when required, stood up to take on those issues and call out the people that he thought were not following the aims and objectives and the vision of the organization that he was part of. PG was a resilient and highly skilled activist, a deeply committed revolutionary, and painstakingly contributed to the rebuilding of the liberation movement in South Africa through his mastery of the art of mass political mobilization and organization since the mid-1970s. Based in Durban, he played a seminal role with his fellow activists in the Natal Indian Congress to launch and develop community-based organizations in large townships such as Phoenix, Chatsworth, and others to address the day-to-day grievances and needs of residents. The model of mass political work against apartheid that he initiated served as a reference point to wider civic and political activism in large parts of the country. This growth of mass-based community organizations laid the basis for the formation of the UDF in 1983, which dealt a devastating blow to the legitimacy of the racist tricameral parliament established a year later. His mastery of activism was displayed through the creative ways in which he managed his professional work as a pharmacist, his involvement in legal and above-ground anti-apartheid work, and his involvement in illegal or underground work for the banned ANC and the SACP. PG said his life has been about learning and growing and adapting through learning. He states in his unauthorized biography, Joining the Dots, "I have to retire at some stage from formal politics and yet look for other ways within my ability and health of contributing. You can retire from a job, but you can't retire as an activist." Sadly, he did not live long enough after his retirement from government to display his continued commitment to our people. As a public representative and minister, Gordhan's conduct has been exemplary and principled, even if it meant taking a stance against the president of his party and country. The Kathrada Foundation will never forget his determined stance against corruption, the unlawful conduct in the public service, and government for which he paid a heavy price, both politically and emotionally. In this very venue, on the 1st of April 2017, a day after he was fired, Pravin spoke at the memorial rally of Ahmed Kathrada and said to South Africa, join the dots. Understand what is at play. Understand the enormity of state capture. And he was then fired, or was already fired, went on to serve in Parliament as an ordinary MP. But if we look at his work in that portfolio committee and the hearings on Eskom, it's a classic example of how Parliament should work, how Parliament should hold public servants accountable in the most thorough and determined way. I wish that Parliament can continue in that tradition because state capture is not over. We remember vividly the public support he enjoyed at the funeral of Kathrada for his brave stance against corruption, administrative malfeasance and state capture, for which he was dismissed. But his resilience knew no bounds. He was returned to high office shortly thereafter and contributed to serving our people and country with distinction until the very end. When we spoke to him briefly on Tuesday at the hospital, he indicated that he would like to be remembered just as an activist who grew up in the streets of central Durban, who had the opportunity to contribute to change in our country and to build a constitutional democracy in South Africa. We will remember PG for this and much more. PG also wrote a speech as he was laying in his sick bed before going into hospital to the 130th anniversary celebrations of the Natal Indian Congress. I just want to read a short extract of that speech. He says, "Today our task, if I may humbly suggest, is to advance the values of genuine democracy, of a democratic culture, and to ensure that the country progresses in the right direction, that its institutions of democracy, created by the Constitution, are made state capture proof. We cannot again have a national prosecuting authority, certain arms of the law enforcement, and the public protector's office recaptured for abuse by those whose only intent is to fill their own bank accounts. Democracy will not survive on its own. Democracy must be constantly secured and enhanced. In many parts of the world, democracy is being undermined by right-wing populism, massive inequality, identity politics, geopolitical tensions, and authoritarianism. The super rich are imposing an inordinate influence on democracy. Democracy must be entrenched, and more work must be done among society to own and defend it. Integrity and ethical conduct in our politics appears to be sadly declining. Populism seemingly represents the interest of the majority of South Africans, but actually represents the interests of just a few. There are many lessons from our past. Now is the time that those that are progressive, politically and socially active to come together to ensure that, one, we build consensus around a common platform of progressive politics. Two, not focus on ourselves, but rather on what we can do for the majority of our people. Three, improve the standards of living of South Africans expeditiously and ethically. So those were his last words, his last written words. As he lay in his hospital bed, some of the most vicious and vile comments were made about PG. But it's Trevor Manuel who responded to some of them. Trevor said, "The statement from the EFF was just a statement of irony because greed and corruption define what the EFF leadership is about. The problem that they had with Pravin Gordan and everybody at SARS is that SARS had to go after the tobacco smugglers. Now don't ask me why the EFF is so attached to tobacco smugglers. Anybody who knows Pravin, anybody who met Pravin, would be able to confirm that his life and lifestyle was completely against every aspect of greed, corruption, and vanity," said Manuel. Now, I want to conclude. How do we take forward PG's legacy? One, we need to understand state capture is not over. It might have disappeared from some of the state-owned enterprises, But I guarantee you it is alive and well in every provincial government department and every municipality across the length and breadth of South Africa. We are blind to it. We are waiting until it is too late. You see it in our hospitals, you see it in our schools, you see it in our clinics, you see it everywhere. My appeal to yourselves as the ANC, don't wait until this is too late. Act now. It's also a challenge for the ANC. How do you honor PG? While dishonoring him with the presence of state capturers in Parliament, there are those who caused the collapse of the SAA, who caused the collapse of Eskom, who sit in Parliament today as members of the ANC and members of other political parties. Why is that the case? Why do we have these double standards? How do we want to claim PG as a champion of what you stand for, and there are those crooks in Parliament who are everything of what PG stood against? You have to decide. How do you honor him when you ignore corruption, waste resources, and tolerate bad services? I want to just end. I am happy that we've seen changes in the city of Johannesburg. Why did you have to wait so long to keep a mayor that was completely incapable to run an 80 billion rand city? And it is these questions that PG has taught us to ask. It is your organization that he was a member of. If his legacy is important to you, don't dishonor him by allowing that which dishonors him to continue. Thank you very much.